all this loot came out, and I'm farming pit. For your benefit though, this video will cover all the god rolls and the armor sets. You guys don't have to worry about what's going down at all. If you need farming tips, my farming guide will be out tomorrow, and is edited like a usual video, not as quickly cobbled together as this. So without further ado, let's get started. First, the origin trait. Sustained weapon damage or final blows versus powerful targets grant this weapon bonus reload, handling, and damage versus combatants. Gain this bonus immediately for a long duration after being revived. Now, the biggest thing on everyone's mind is the damage increase, and after some simple math, it equates to basically a 7% damage increase after 4 shots on the linear. On the GL, there doesn't seem to be any sort of damage increase, but it does still proc. And in case you were wondering, you cannot proc the trait on one weapon and then swap to another and have the buff be active. The buff must come from the weapon if it wants the benefits. On the glaive, you can trigger the perk by stabbing 10 times or shooting 4 times. The buff here is basically the same, although it can be rounded up to 8% if you're feeling crazy. Although 7 to 8% isn't a huge damage increase, you do have to remember this is an origin trait, and I think that 7% is very solid for basically free. The real benefit of this trait, I think, is the reload speed, which is very noticeable compared to base, as you can see in this clip. The handling is also not to be ignored, with this being very helpful for bonus swap speed in a damage rotation if that's needed, which given the rolls of these bad boys could be a possibility. The enhanced version of the trait, which as I could tell in my testing, does not increase damage further, but does seem to help out with reload and handling. Here is an example damage rotation I just came up with without any weapons with ideal rolls. Onto the actual weapon rolls, there are 4 drops from the dungeon, akin to every other dungeon ever, so yeah, let's get started. Up first is Adamantite. Not much has changed about this weapon since it launched over a year ago, other than the addition of Psychic, which if you're familiar with the support auto frame is the perk you want because it grants Resto on the solar one and should grant Woven Mail on this one, which is great for survivability via damage resistance, but if you want actual healing, Reciprocity is also in that column, so really go for whichever one suits you more, and then pair it with Circle of Life in the second column for a damage bonus after healing an ally. If you aren't using this as the ally healer 3000 or just want to try something else out, maybe get a bit more ad clear out of this thing, Demo Hatchling is sitting right there for you. Refusal of the Call is interesting because I don't fool around with glaives too much. Like the last time I did glaives was when the Close to Melee perk launched in Season of the Seraph and it was busted with Titan and Synthos. I think I have a video on my channel somewhere of me doing a solo flawless Heresy with that. Regardless, this glaive has a very interesting mix of damage perks that I think will really crank this thing well past the max. In the first column we have Close to Melee, which I think is the only viable DPS or Elite or GM clearing option if you want to build for that, but second column is where it gets interesting, with your choice of almost any viable damage perk. The pick I think would be the most viable is Frenzy 2, aka Chaos Reshaped, because the entire glaive playstyle is just being in combat anyway. Why not have a passive buff and even passive healing while in the fight? If you want something a little more predictable and consistent, Aggregate Charge and Sword Logic are both on here and both incredible choices for building out a hyper-aggressive, high damage dealing in-your-face glaive build. On the exact opposite side of the glaive build spectrum, you could go for a max defense build with a combo like Discord and Replenishing Aegis to really keep your shield up as much as possible. I can't imagine you doing much else with this thing. On to the weapon most of you are here for, the new Psychopomp. And guys, they juiced this thing. This might as well be a new weapon compared to the one back in Heresy, thanks to this new perk pool. The first thing I want to talk about is the damage roll on this thing. Almost every weapon this update I feel got elemental honing, and this is no exception. For damage rotations that require a more passive or sustained style of DPS, this thing is a warrior. And if you wanted to, you could exchange elemental honing for attrition orbs if you need that extra healing or surge. I personally am cooking up a build of this roll that I think will do very good. If elemental honing is too much for you, and instead of trying to max out every kind of subclass damage, you want to keep it simple with a single subclass, this weapon can also do that. If you replace elemental honing with Gear Shift, the new busted arc perk that is basically a free 35% damage increase, you'll be set as long as you have a consistent way to be amplified. Just run Arc Titan with this aspect if you don't want to be crazy creative with crafting a new build. If you don't want this thing for damage and instead just want to tear up some ads with crazy room control, this thing also has you covered. The role of Demo Voltshot is an incredible role for ad control and looping abilities on something like Arc Warlock Ionic Trace build or even an Arc Hunter ability spam build. Bro, even Arc Titan can benefit heavy from this. And if you think Voltshot is too much or want to spec into something to help melt the majors or elites, you have either Harmony or Sword Logic to get a fast and easy damage buff. This this weapon is actually so good, it can cover any of the 4 classes of weapons that I talked about ages ago on my first ever video that blew up. I know I said a lot of different perks there, so let me break it down into the classes of weapon you know you want to grind for to get what you want. If you use this for utility, you'll want to run either auto-loading holster or demolitionist with attrition orbs. If you use this for ad clear, you'll want either demolitionist or ambitious assassin with volt shot. If you use this for major melting, you'll want either demolitionist or auto-loading holster with harmony or sword logic. And lastly, if you're using this in a DPS rotation, you'll want to have auto-loading holster with either elemental honing or gear shift to maximize damage. Okay, that was a lot. On to the next and final weapon, Eyes Unveiled. The for sure beloved linear fusion rifle. With Bungie giving us so many new weapons to choose from and truly trying to level the playing field in terms of damage on heavy weapon types, I wouldn't be surprised if linears ended up back in the meta stronger than ever, at least for certain bosses. And if I'm being honest, this just isn't the best linear out there. It's solid, don't get me wrong, but I'll tell you right now, if you want a linear fusion that does some serious damage, go farm for a Storm Chaser, or pull out that old Cataclysmic from the vault and make it a tier 5. That being said, if you don't have the ability to get either of those, you should go for the role of Overflow or 4th times the charm and elemental honing on this. And yeah, honestly, that's about it. There isn't a good reason to use this gun for utility, and you certainly don't want to use your heavy for ad clear unless it's a GM or harder content. But even then, just run a machine gun. Again, the only time you'd use a heavy for melting majors or killing elites is in a GM or something akin to that. Maybe a raid when you're on div, but even still, just running a machine gun, albeit with good perks, is far better ammo-wise and far more forgiving damage and precision-wise for any sort of ad clear and major melting. Okay, but God forbid I want to run a gun for fun, and you choose this one? Let's just say I do. Well, you could explosion max, as this thing has 2 explosion perks in separate columns, butterfly in the first column, making enemies explode after aiming down sights for 1.5 seconds and then blasting them away, and chain reaction in the second column, doing what it has always done best, explode things. You could also exchange chain reaction for reservoir burst to see which explosion works best for you. Okay, that was all the weapons. Now I want to briefly touch on the armor. Obviously you can grind for whatever stats you want, but I wanted to talk about the perks on these bad boys. The 2-piece bonus is pretty cool, allowing finishers to store a charge that grants you a burst of health and kickstarts healing once your shields are depleted. The 4-piece bonus basically allows you to spam solar slag on melees while you have resto, radiant, or cure. Although these don't exactly play together perfectly, you could always mix and match armor sets for a finisher build. The 2-piece Veritas set from Throne World could pair well, maybe even the 2-piece Shattered Throne armor. There's a ton of sets that work with finishers for some reason. Anyways, pretty cool. Maybe finally making all those finisher related fragments worthwhile. Briefly, I also want to touch on the Xenophage catalyst because it does drop from the end of this dungeon. It has rampage and chain reaction for some reason, making it like an ad clear major melting GM machine. Just know that that's what's on Xenophage, and it drops from the end of this dungeon. And that's basically everything new about the dungeon. I apologized about the rushed and not hyper edited nature of this one, but I'm just trying to get it out before the farming guide comes out tomorrow. Not that anyone will use it until Pit of Heresy is the featured dungeon, but I digress. Farm away and get those god rolls for this tiny corner of the game. They may come in handy someday. Subscribe, join the Discord, like, share, comment, come back tomorrow for the farm guide, and look out for my thoughts on literally Pit of Heresy 2. Like, how is that added to the game? It's so cool. Bye.